A good writer must also be a good reader. So, writers, what are you reading these days, and what takeaways can you apply from it to your own writing? I'll answer that question for myself in just a moment. It's Sam with another video for you, and yes, I know I normally do these live, but this happens this week. I'm out of town with my family, and we are going to be traveling on Friday around the time I normally do a video. So yes, I am pre-recording this one. Sorry to disappoint. I'll hopefully have another live one for you next week. But the good news about traveling is there was a while I wasn't driving, and I got to do some good reading on the road. Well, just hours in the car with nothing else to do. Got to actually finish the book I was reading, and here's the book I was reading. I'll talk about this one. This is Trigger Mortis, a James Bond 007 novel by Anthony Horowitz. Okay, the first by Anthony Horowitz. I'll tell you about that. So, yeah, this obviously is an action adventure, spy thriller novel. It's pretty cool. Yeah, obviously James Bond is an iconic character. I've never read a James Bond book before. Actually, I may have read a junior James Bond novel, like when I was little or something, when I was like in elementary school, but I've never read a full-length James Bond novel before. I have not read the classic ones. I've seen the Daniel Craig movies, all 5 of those. I've seen maybe bits and pieces of the old ones, but not like a lot of them. So, I guess I'm a casual Bond fan. But what really drew me to this novel was the author, Anthony Horowitz, an author I was already familiar with. If you didn't know, Anthony Horowitz also wrote the Alex Rider books, which is basically a teenage version of James Bond. He's like a 14-year-old British boy who becomes a spy. The series started with Stormbreaker in the early 2000s, and I read it when I was in 8th grade, and I was hooked. And I was like, "This is awesome! Like, this is great! You know, it's suspenseful action adventure writing." And I read those for a long time, probably longer than was age appropriate for me. I wanted to finish the series. There were supposed to be 10 books, or I think, yeah, it was 9 books, and then the 10th one was a spin-off about a different character. The 9th one was supposed to be the end of Alex Rider's adventures. So I read all of those again. I mean, they started in the early 2000s, but they went, it was only one every few years. Do the math. I read them through high school and college, and I think maybe I was in grad school when the last one came out. And yes, I finished the series, even though it was beyond what was age appropriate for me. But then I found out he was still writing more. I think it was so popular that after he was supposed to end it, they wanted him to come back, or I don't know if it was his idea or the publisher's idea, but there was like an 11th book then that undid the previous ending, kind of, and I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm gonna read all those now. I had my finale, and I've read past that point, and I'm I've grown past it. Probably won't keep up with all the new Alex Rider books then. Now that I'm an adult, until maybe if my son is a teenager in 10 years and he likes them, maybe I'll kind of relive them through his eyes. But yeah, so I'm past the point of a young adult secret agent novel. But basically, what I'm saying is those novels, I enjoyed them a lot as a teenager and young adult. I appreciate this author and his style. And so when I found out that Anthony Horowitz was writing the canonical James Bond novels now, I had to jump on. Apparently, according to the acknowledgments, the Ian Fleming estate approached him and asked him to write some of these. So he got big enough that he's now writing the actual James Bond novels, which is pretty cool. It's like like I don't know, writing a certain character or a certain genre. Obviously, he was influenced by James Bond. The quintessential British spy, and then he started writing books about a character like that, and now he's actually writing for James Bond. That would be like if I am writing my own superheroes, and then one day I get a chance to write Spider-Man, maybe I'd be like over the moon. So this is pretty cool. I mean, from a fan perspective and an author perspective, I feel like he's written 3 of these now. This is the first one, came out in 2015. I believe he just had he has 2 more that are out. I don't know how many he's going to write of James Bond, but I want to read others too. But I just read this one. This is the first of Anthony Horowitz's James Bond novels, and enjoyed it a lot. In some ways, of course, you probably know what to expect from a James Bond novel, or even if you have never read the novels, if you've seen the movies, obviously, I think even the back summary says something about like fast cars, beautiful women, and dastardly villains. And I'm like, yeah, that kind of sums it up. Yes, there's car chases. He actually part of this one is he's getting involved or like going undercover as a professional race car driver, and and just he gets to like live that life for a few days and learn how to drive an actual race car, and of course that's part of the thrill of it. And of course, if you didn't know already, he faces death-defying situations and comes to near-death experiences a few times, and obviously pulls through. Spoilers: he doesn't die in this book, and yes, defeats the villain. Spoilers. So yes, it's in many ways a very classic, typical James Bond adventure. I mean, you know what to expect when you're reading an action novel like this, especially from an iconic character like James Bond. But this author I like was writing it. Excuse me. And he puts his own touch on it, so I wanted to see how he did. Let me tell you in just a moment things I liked and things I didn't like. I definitely liked it more than I didn't like it. Anthony Horowitz has this way with, I guess, I don't know, just descriptions, and it's hard for me to put my finger on it and define it, which for me is a good thing. Like if it's so complex or so good that it defies words for me, then I'm like, I can't really define it or articulate it, but I know it's good, and I know it piques my interest. One thing he does is just a spy's adventure takes him all over the world into different cultures, and I know the author's done his research into it. I mean, even when I was reading Alex Wetter, I was impressed like that. Like he would go to different countries and be part of their cultures, and I didn't know much about other cultures outside of books I read occasionally, but I always thought it was cool just to see the different places and such he went, and the author's done his research. According to the acknowledgments, also he was able to do some real life research into like professional racing and got someone to take him around in a race car, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. So it's not just cultures, but like different fields, or I guess different maybe hobbies or activities, if you want to call them, that a spy would do. He is actually looking into these things and writing realistically about them, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. So just the way he does that with it's well researched, and I guess it gives a vibrancy to books like these. They feel real because they're based in the real world, but he does his research and figures out how to represent these cultures and hobbies and such realistically. And then the way he describes the characters too. He has a good way of, I don't know, again, it's hard for me to define, but saying a lot with a little. I want to read you maybe a few passages to you can get a sense of what I mean. When he's on the race car track, Horowitz writes this about him. He's learning how to handle this fast car. It says, 2 days later, Bond would have known everything there was to know about Nürburgring blindfolded. Nürburgring is the name of the track in Germany, I think. He had spent 6 hours a day driving the Maserati and another 6 going over the films, photographs, and written descriptions that had been provided for him. I'll skip down a little bit. The sound of the engine told him exactly how fast he was going and at how many revs per minute. He had calculated the right angle for the next corner long before he had reached it. He understood the car so well, he was beginning to think like it. I'm like, I don't know enough about cars or driving to have written that sentence, and I'm like, that's just kind of cool. Another thing is, I'll skip again. 12 years after the war, it was still too soon to be back in Germany. By the way, he sets this like within, I guess within Fleming's James Bond, or within like the time period of the original novels. So it's set in the 50s. It's set like historically within the time Ian Fleming was writing. So this is set in like 57, I think. And so 12 years after the war is, of course, after World War II. It was still too soon to be back in Germany. I mean, that sentence alone conveys a lot. Bond wondered if he would ever be comfortable there. The ghosts were still present, the dead and the living. Driving through what was left of the old Cologne, he reflected on the sickness that had seized hold of a nation and propelled it in the path to almost total destruction. Okay, I'll just read a little bit of like one more section of how he's like describing this one character. And this is, I guess, from Bond's mind also. Behind the desk, Captain Eugene T. Lawrence, USN, sat with the easygoing obstinacy of a man too used to being obeyed. The Navy liaison and private officer at Wallops Island was a man in his mid-40s, immaculately dressed in his summer uniform, khaki with gold buttons, and 3 rows of ribbons nudging into his lapel, dark tie, and shoulder boards buttoned up in every sense. He had the solid build and huge neck of a football player. The head, with its sandy-colored hair, small eyes, and smooth cheeks, was curiously baby-like. Bond guessed he went to church every Sunday. He would have a wife who would boast about him to her friends, but who would wince at the sound of his coming home, and a son, Eugene Jr., who would call him Sir. He was the man in charge here, and it didn't matter if you had better judgment, more experience, or new information. You did as he said. So that, I mean, they always say show don't tell, and obviously, I mean, he describes some physical features, but he also gives an emotional weight to it. He gives Bond's perceptions of this person, like not just what he looks like, but the kind of man he is, just the vibe I guess he gives off, and that kind of thing is hard to put my finger on. It's hard for me to nail down, but when it's done well, or when it's done in a, I guess, uniquely humanizing way, I notice it, and I'm like, that's cool. Like I wish sometimes I wish I could write like that. So it's cool. I also think it's interesting because we struggle, or at least I struggle with, the age-old question of how much do you get into a character's mind, how much do you want to give their inner thoughts versus just kind of, again, show don't tell. There is walking that line, and I know sometimes it's popular to like just do the camera lens approach, which people say like basically right as if only a camera lens is showing, meaning you don't get into characters' thoughts, you don't get into their emotions, you only describe action, description, physical details, and stuff like that. And that's an interesting approach. I'm more toward that extreme than I used to be. I'm probably not 100% to that extreme in my writing, but and I think sometimes when we think of a character like Bond, who's this iconic hero, who he's a tough guy. He doesn't talk much. He doesn't show emotion openly or weakness openly. I think sometimes when we see a character like that, we're like, oh yeah, he has to be this stoic character who doesn't really have these perceptions, that doesn't really think about anyone else or judge anyone else or show his weakness. But the author really does show his, I guess his internal thoughts, even sad and discouraged ones, like it was still too soon to be back in Germany, things like that. I mean, he doesn't overly go into Bond's thoughts, but he doesn't like overly like explain or make him look weak or anything, but it's enough to humanize him, and it's enough to get the point across, and it's more than just the camera lens approach. It is a description that tells us about the character's mind and thoughts and feelings and such. And so I think walking that balance is really interesting. I have a hard time putting that into words or defining it in even one term, but he portrays the character well. Again, it's an iconic character. I'm sure it's tough to write. I mean, if I had a chance to write something like this, I'd be like, okay, don't mess it up, like how can I portray him well without and get the right notes without going too much or too little. And I think Horowitz strikes the right balance. I mean, again, I have not read the old novels, so I don't exactly know what to compare it to, but just this iconic character like a Bond, he comes across well in a way that is humanizing to an extent, but still Bond still feels like Bond, like he's not overly weak or overly emotional or anything. He's confident but human. So he strikes that good balance. I'm sure it's hard to strike that balance with our heroes too. With especially if you have a hero who you want to be, I don't know, tough or strong but still human. It's hard to know when to show one side or the other, or how to blend them well. So I think he does that. I think he does that well. Again, it's hard for me to put my finger on now and now. It's just repeating myself. So sorry, but that's. I guess Horowitz's style is one thing I like about the book. Horowitz's style and his way of describing things, describing places and people and action, and conveying a lot in a little. That's what I'd say I would emulate if I could, or you should emulate if you can. That's a good thing. There's another thing. I guess one of the negatives, and again, I like this book overall. I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I'm not claiming it's high literature or anything, but for a fun escapist reading while on vacation, it was a lot of fun. One thing I didn't like, and one thing that I wasn't used to, I guess. I've read, like I said, I've read a young adult teenage secret agent novels by this author. So they were a little cleaner. Of course, writing James Bond for adults. There is the element of James Bond's character where he's a womanizer, and he sleeps with different women and all that stuff, and that's in here. There are some sexualized descriptions of women that some might take offense to, and of course, like I said, it's set within the other novels. It's set in the 50s. The character named Pussy Galore is in it. I don't have to explain that for you. I mean, she's not like the whole book, but she's there. And these sexualized descriptions, they're on every page. It's not pervasive, but it's there. And I was like, oh, I kind of didn't expect that. I mean, I should have maybe, but again, I'm used to reading this author writing young adult spy novels, and that wasn't the main thing I was looking for in James Bond novels. So I was like, I wasn't thinking of that beforehand, but it's in there. So if that bothers you from either a moral perspective or a writing quality perspective, where it seems objectifying of people, just be aware of that. And there's a couple descriptions also that again that like he deals with different cultures. The villains in this one, are the Russians, and there's a Korean also who ends up being the main villain. And there are a few descriptions that could be seen today as offensive. I don't think they're meant that way by the author. At no point does he talk about like does he apply this to like every person of the race. But if Bond doesn't know the character's name, he might refer to the Korean and then like say something negative about him. And it could be taken in the wrong way. I don't think that was the author's intention at all. He said something in the acknowledgements about I hope it didn't offend modern sensibilities too much. And I'm like, I don't think you did, but I can see where some people might be offended by that. For me, the sexual descriptions are more of an issue. So just that's in there. Be aware if you want to read it. That might offend some people, and if it's not for you, I get it. I don't want to tell you what book is or isn't good for you. But if you can look past that, or if you can read it without getting distracted or getting bothered by that, it's a fun read. It really entertained me, and just it was fun to see this author writing. This author who I've liked for a long time, for probably 20 years now, or close to it, getting to write one of his favorite characters of James Bond, and writing for adults now. Like I said, there's 2 more of these out, 2 more by Horowitz, 2 more James Bond novels, and maybe more to come in the future. I don't know. I have one of the other ones, and I'm hoping to read it soon. Trigger Mortis by James Bond, fun book. Sorry, not by James Bond, about James Bond by Anthony Horowitz, fun book. Positives and negatives, mostly positives, I think. If I could give you one takeaway, I'd say it's just learn how to say a lot with little when it comes to action and description. Obviously, in most areas, we want to. A lot of us need to be less wordy. A lot of us need to work on cutting things down and on again, show don't tell, on packing a lot of punch in a few words, and I think he does that well. I mean, some of those descriptions were longer, like I said, like I read you one longish paragraph, but he wasn't just describing physical descriptions. He wasn't just saying, oh, he had, I forget, brown hair, or he was wearing this kind of uniform. He was just describing this is the kind of man he was, or that Bond thought he was. And it gives a lot of description. It gives you an emotional feel of the character with that. He does similar things for describing places and the scenery and action, and it's just a good way of writing. So I need to learn from that. I've been told that one of my areas of weakness is scenery. I mean, and things like that, and just descriptions. So I'm still learning how to write a lot with a little, or how to say a lot with a little. I'm sure that's something all of us can work on too. Keep that in mind. And if you want a good example, check out Trigger Mortis by Anthony Horowitz, or any of these other novels, because he's written quite a few in the action, suspense, adventure genre. Anyway, that's it. That's my review of Trigger Mortis, and I hope you enjoyed that. Hope your writing is going well. Hope you're also getting a chance to maybe travel or go out on vacation or see family or do something fun this summer like I am this week. Yeah, and hope you're being productive in whatever you're setting your hand to this week. So thanks for watching and listening. I'll be live with you next Friday is the plan, July 1st, I believe, and we'll see you then. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. Bye.